Good morning, Year 8, and welcome to the next lesson in our series on how technology has changed over time. Today we're going to be focusing on the medieval period. Please make sure you have your assignment open and you're writing in it. And once we've finished, please make sure you hand it in ready for some feedback from your teachers. So, the do now is on the screen and on your assignments. I'd like you to spend 10 minutes completing those 8 questions. So pause the video here for 10 minutes and I'll see you at the end. Okay, so question 1. Who were the inhabitants of Britain before the Romans? They were the Celts. What shape of house did people live in before the Romans? They were round houses. What was the name of the long water-carrying structures that Romans built? They were the aqueducts. Did Romans build the first roads in Britain? Yes, they did. Did Romans have street lighting? Yes, they did. What was the name of the greatest sewer in Rome? It was called the Cloaca Maxima. Name another invention of the Romans brought to Britain. There are lots. You could have said apartment blocks, sewers, concrete, underfloor heating, baths, or even the calendar. And who was the emperor that invaded Britain successfully? That was Emperor Claudius. So please write in the correct answers if you haven't already done so. Make sure it's fully up to date, and then we can move on with the rest of the lesson. So to start off with, a little warm up. There are 5 inventions on the screen. I'd like you to tell me what each piece of technology is and tell me what they're used for. I'll give you 5 minutes and I'll see you after that. Okay, so number 1 is a clock. Number 2 are writing materials, so having the ability to write. So there's a quill and there's ink. Question 3 is gunpowder or gunpowder horn, which is a brand new type of kind of military weaponry that happens in the late medieval period. Question 4 is a spinning wheel, which is used to turn wool into thread to make textiles or clothes. And number 5 is an astrolabe, and an astrolabe is used to help with direction and time. Okay, so before we move on to the medieval period, it's important to note that the medieval period, often referred to as the Dark Ages, starts in 410 AD, and that is when the Roman army leaves Britain. So it was invaded by lots of different people in this time period, people from Northern Europe and Germany. Collectively, at the time, they're known as the Anglo-Saxons. Britain was broken up into lots of small kingdoms, which came into conflict with each other, and they were regularly raided by the Vikings and other people from Scandinavia. There are no professional armies like the Romans had. The best way to live safely and securely was to fortify towns with walls, which the Anglo-Saxon called burhs. Often an old Roman town, such as Exeter or York, was used. Old Roman buildings were pulled down to use the stones in the walls. However, the Anglo-Saxons also built new burhs at strategically important sites such as Oxford. This was a place where oxen could easily cross the river there. Buildings didn't get very tall in this period because the technology, resources, and knowledge were unavailable. So lots of historians mark this time as the Dark Ages because when the Romans left, we actually take a huge step back in technology, and it takes Britain a long time to rebuild itself ready to, to have good technology. So today we're going to be looking at various different points. We're going to be looking at public health, castles, towns, knights, and communication. And this is your main task. For your main task, I want you to watch these 5 videos, and as you watch them, I want you to make comments about medieval technology for me. Once you finish those videos, you can take a look, you can tell me how things have changed since the Romans. So the first stage is just noting down what the different types of medieval technology were. So we've got public health, castles, towns, knights, and communication, and how much has changed since the Romans left. This should take you about 25 minutes. So you can pause this video to go off and watch those other videos, and I'll link them in the description below. but I'm also going to go through some information on them, so you can pause the video here or you can continue to watch and fill in your table. So settlements, the main settlement at the time was Motte and Bailey castles. They were one of the most famous inventions of the Middle Ages. The Normans built the first castles in England when William the Conqueror invaded. When William the Conqueror won the Battle of Hastings, he needed to secure Britain and stop other people from trying to take the throne, so he started to build lots of castles. The Norman castle was the perfect settlement with which to do this because a small garrison of professional Norman soldiers could defend the area easily. So we call it the Motte and the Bailey. So the Bailey has a ditch dug around it, and it's got wooden palisades or walls around it. And at the top, all the dirt that was used when you took out the ditches is put to create the motte, which is a large hill where there's a big watchtower at the top. Now that watchtower could be used when the people who live in the Bailey are running away, and they would run up the hill, they'd pull up the drawbridge or the flying bridge, and they would then be safe in the keep. So it's a very good way to defend. There are almost 1,000 Motte and Bailey castles being built in England, Wales, and Scotland at the time. Settlements or medieval towns. Settlements were refined during this period, and as peace started to spread, so as there weren't wars going on, people started to build. We've got the image of medieval Exeter here, shows a lot about the development of the settlement. It's obviously within the old Roman walls, which is Roman technology they started to build. And there are two main streets, and all the other area is kind of side streets. And if you note, right at the top, there's a motte, which is up here, and that was to help to defend the town when it was attacked. There's lots of churches. There's a church and a cathedral, which just shows how important religion was at the time. And as new building techniques started to come in, the buildings started to get even taller. Religious buildings start becoming very important. Christianity was an important aspect of life. The rule of the Normans in England brought significant changes in the church and monastery. The churches themselves started as small wooden buildings, but eventually they were started to be made out of stone, and they would start to get taller and taller. We have churches being built with spires, and we also have cathedrals being built, very elaborate, well-built cathedrals. Warfare and knights. So most knights at the time fought on with armor and on horseback. During the 200 years during the medieval period, the open face helmets, kite-shaped shields, and mail shirts of the Normans developed into stronger and more elaborate armor. They wore helmets completely covering their heads so no one could recognize them. So people started to create coat of arms for themselves so they could be identified on the battlefield. The most dangerous weapon of the medieval period was not the sword, it was in fact the longbow. The English longbow had a range of over 200 meters. It could shoot 6 arrows a minute if you were a good archer. And this was most clearly demonstrated at the Battle of Agincourt, which was a huge English victory, creating 10,000 French casualties compared to a few hundred English casualties. Cannons were also, at the very early stage of invention, but they were very dangerous to the users, but it was the future of battle. Communication is one of the most significant changes during the medieval period. At the beginning of the period, the only way you could read a book would be if that book had been created. There were very few books in circulation. Why? Because books had to be handwritten by monks. So say you wanted to make 10 copies of a particular book, you'd have to get 10 monks to write word for word without making mistakes to create that book. A lot of those books were written in Latin as well, which meant that normal people couldn't read them. However, the biggest invention of the time was Gutenberg's printing press. And the printing press meant that books could spread, and pamphlets and newspapers could spread quickly. Science, technology, and history all saw great leaps as institutional knowledge began to accrue around the world. So the printing press allowed for books to be printed en masse and then shared across the world pretty much. They would be produced cheaper and more quickly and in greater numbers. So the printing press completely revolutionized how we share information with other people. Transport, there were ships becoming more sophisticated. They could start to travel across major oceans like the Atlantic. We had large luxurious carriages, and the wheelbarrow is invented or perhaps rediscovered at the time, which makes agriculture a lot easier. The final one we're going to look at is public health. So dental hygiene was important. People rubbed herbs, wine, vinegar into their teeth and brushed or picked them out with pieces of wood or linen. There's rudimentary or basic surgical care. The blacksmith's pliers could sort out rotten tooth, and the butcher could remove a gangrenous limb for you. Toilets did exist, but they were not flushing toilets. You'd often have to go to your local cesspit to be able to go to the toilet. And public bathing was still quite common. People didn't have it in their own homes. So that brings us to the end of that table. So please pause the video here if you're still completing your table. Make sure you've watched all 5 videos. And once you've done that, I want you to use what we've learnt today to answer the questions. What was the role of individuals? What was the role of economics? What was the role of war? What was life like at the end of the era? So I want you to pause there and I want you to answer those 4 sentences and it should take you about 10 minutes to do so. See you in 10 minutes. Okay, so a good example would be someone like William the Conqueror as an individual was important. Without his invention, without his invasion, there would be no castles and no new military technology. You could also talk about Gutenberg inventing the printing press. That was a major change as well. So, final task then. In the medieval era, which factor had the biggest impact on the change in technology? Was it individuals, economics, war, or a different factor? Use the sentence starters to complete your answer. I'm expecting a minimum of 8 sentences with an extra one, so 9 sentences to have a sentence conclusion. That is the minimum I expect, 9 sentences. Write in full sentences, complete the sentence starters, and I'll see you once you've finished. That should take you 10 minutes. So pause the video and I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, really well done with today's lesson. Please make sure you're submitting your work to your teachers. They are looking forward to giving you some good feedback on those lessons. And I will see you next Monday for your latest lesson. All right, goodbye.